Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Board Gaming Doctor. My name is Phil, and I'll be your Board Game Doctor today. In this episode, I go over my first thoughts and impressions of Bier Pioniere. This is a game that was developed in 2023 or designed by Thomas Spitzer, rather, published by Spielfable, art by Harold Leask, and this game was, if I'm not mistaken, one of the games that was recommended for the Kennerspiel this year. So that's what originally put this game on my radar, and as I read the description, it seemed interesting to me because it had a lot of similarities to Viticulture, a very popular game, and a game that I enjoy very much. So let's go through a quick rundown, and I'm trying something different here. I wanted to show you my finished play of Bier Pioneer at a two-player game. And in this version, the cards and rulebook are all in English and more on the language plans, I suppose, for what this game is supposed to have in the future. Right now, it's physically available in German only, but there might be some chances where in the future it will be available in other languages. But as a quick overview, in this game, you are using worker placement and multi-use cards to be able to grow your brewery as a brewmaster in the form of this tableau that you have in front of you. And over the course of multiple rounds, it takes as many rounds as you need to be able to traverse 20 points on the victory track here. Once you do so, then the game ends, and whoever has the most points wins. So that is a very quick overview, but let's get into some of the highlights, and starting with the mechanism of worker placement. So as you can see from some of these workers on the board, each worker starts with a strength or, quote unquote, number or strength on them. And you place them onto open worker placement spots and block them from other players from playing there. And there are a couple of reasons why this is important. One, the sum of the worker that you place onto a spot and the number next to it, if that equals 6 or more, you get to place a small bonus worker on the bonus action board here. And so, depending on some circumstances, you can play it for one of these bonus actions that you can take and choose from once you make that certain requirement happen. And you don't start, as you can see, the numbers are different among these players, these workers. Starting at the game, you start with a worker strengths of 1 and 2, and during the game you can take an action to upgrade your workers, and when you do so, at the end of the round, after you have placed them, the worker retires and you place it next to your tableau here. And when you do so, you get to take off a certain space that is seen on the board here for an additional bonus that you can choose from. But you also get some space to be able to place barrels from your barrel thing here, as well as brews that you make in your brewery section here. So that is another function of these workers, and when you do so, you place the worker down and you get to upgrade to one that is bigger and better. And then there's some other ways to take actions in this game. You have the administration action here that you can take on your turn for one of these bonuses and actions. You have the truck here that you can place on certain worker placement spots, mostly to fulfill orders, but also to accomplish different things, as you can see here. In particular, trading in resources here for points or coin. And you also have a worker up here that you can take and place onto any one of these spots. At the end of the round, the worker that is furthest to the left will become the first player, and so on and so forth. And so if the round ended, that would happen. So a couple of different ways to use those workers. Next are the multi-use cards. Zooming in on some of these as an example, you have different areas of the card that have different effects. One, the white spot, either has some ongoing effects that are tied to some famous figures from German brewing history, or some of them have one-time effects like this one. You have the top beige portion of the card that you end up stacking on top of each other like so in front of your tableau. When you take certain worker placement actions, you get to activate one of these the cascades of actions that you can take based off of how many of these cards and columns are showing that particular action that you take. And then you also have the purple section here, which include the orders that you're trying to fulfill when you place your truck into that certain worker placement spot for a lot of points. Next is the actual brewing beer. So as you can see here, when you brew beer, you actually start with a lot of these spaces. Here's an unused board. You can brew one beer at first, but then you, during the course of the game, remove these blocking tiles as well as these additional blocking spots on top of the coops to be able to finally choose a beer that is represented here, and you place it down onto your dial. And for using this track as well, you determine how far away the brew is ready from being ready. And it usually at the beginning of the game starts here at 6. And but as you upgrade this track and do things, you could start brewing at a sooner number. And by taking actions to brew, such as depicted here, you can accelerate the rate of brewing, as well as at the end of each round, you can also take a free rotation until it gets to 0. And once it does, you remove that dial and take a beer from the general supply and you place it into your tableau. So that is how it works, and it takes time, and part of the game is trying to be as efficient as possible to brew as many beers as you can and as fast as you can to be able to fulfill orders before anyone else does. So with that in mind, comparing this game to others, the first one that I mentioned before was Viticulture. So both games have many similarities in the way that they end the game. At 20, you're crossing a threshold. I think it's 20 in Viticulture. If not, it's 25. But you that same game end trigger is found in both games. The way that turn order is determined is also very similar in choosing different bonuses that get better the farther down you move. But you sacrifice your turn order for that as well. Having bonus workers is more of a unique feature of Bier Pioniere, but in both games you do have worker placement that can be pretty cutthroat. And the strategy behind this game is very similar to Viticulture, where brewing beers and fulfilling orders is not always the top priority or the top way to score points. Very much so in Viticulture, where you can do a tasting room or a tour of your vineyard for points, like a steady stream of points to get throughout the game. You always have this spot where you can dedicate barrels that you acquire or beers for 1 point, and sometimes if you pay extra money, you can pay that for an extra point as you take this action. And you could potentially take it twice on a turn if you have a worker placement that you place here first before anyone else, as well as your truck. And there are other ways to score points, such as in the turn order, the different ongoing effects as well, and one-time effects have ways to score points. And in this bonus section right here can also get you a point as well. So there are a lot of different ways that you can score points in this game. It does not always have to come down to the big orders that you're trying to fulfill, and that is very reminiscent of Viticulture as well. Other games that share more minor similarities in terms of the mechanisms and how the game plays include Lowlands and Teotihuacan, where both games offer worker placement or dice placement strategies, but include a bigger emphasis on the pips or the strength of these workers. They deal a lot with the fact that the stronger the worker, the better the action will be, and in this game it comes down to being able to take bonus actions, but in those games it has a myriad of different consequences that may happen. And in addition to Teotihuacan and Villagers as well, as another game that is compared, the aspect that you retire these workers to allow for tableau building and further advancement in your game is also seen. And so there's always a progression of trying to get bigger and better workers and upkeep the quality of workers that you have in each game. The card play and the multi-use card, the cards that you see in this game are very reminiscent of La Granja, in my opinion. And it's not like a typical deck builder where you're playing multiple cards each turn. You perhaps get to play maybe one or two of these cards and draw into probably 5 or 6, depending on how long the game goes, maybe more. And so you're only playing a handful of those cards. You have a deck of about 60 cards or so, if I count these correctly, maybe 50 to 60 cards, and so there's plenty of variability among these cards, and it has the same feel for the most part as the card selection in La Granja, less so in comparison to Viticulture, in my opinion. But those are the closest comparisons that I could make, and there aren't a lot of peer reviews available on Board Game Geek, but there are some comments of people who have played this game. A lot of them are very positive. A lot of people praise this game for its puzzly nature and worker placement aspects. It feels thematic to brewing beer, having your tableau development resemble your brewery, and the spinning of the beer dials seems very thematic to allowing time for your beers to brew, and a lot of people really enjoyed that. If you are familiar with worker placement, this game is fairly easy to pick up, and people, once again, about the thematics, really enjoy seeing a lot of these famous folks. Like in my tableau down here, for example, I've got Adolf Coors playing a role for me, which was pretty interesting to see, and so you get to learn a few things along the way. There are some concerns that people have made about this game, and that include, first, the rulebook. It originally was made for German speakers, and so perhaps there are some translation mix-ups in the process of translating it to the English one that I have used here. But the order of things was, I admit, a little daunting for myself to learn strictly from the rulebook, and needed a video to help me along. And people also talk about the first player advantage, particularly being able to take the upgrade worker action first by spending this coin and being able to upgrade your worker. The fact of the matter is that only one, or in a larger game with 3 or 4 players, 2 people per round would be able to upgrade their worker, and so there is a lot of competition for this space and to be able to create more efficient workers down the road. And so you might have to, sacrifice a couple of turns with some less efficient, worker placement to add to your, your strategic decisions that you make each turn. But if you're first, you have this option available to you. And so, so there is that. And in addition to that too, being able to upgrade your workers first might be able to cascade to better actions later on that may give you a jump start that is hard to catch up from. But that is the opinion of some, and I would only comment on it. I would have to play the game more to really find that out for myself. Finally, some people did have an issue with the overall strategy of the game. Some of them disparaged the idea that you can strictly acquire any kind of beer or any number of barrels or money and just trade them in for points. I guess it does work out in case the cards don't add up for you. So there is a somewhat of a luck of the draw aspect to this game based off of what cards you have and what orders you can try to fulfill. But some people don't like the simplistic strategy of just going for the space every turn to give you that steady stream of points to gain throughout the game. And it's very similar to the situation that many people find Dominion in, with the coin strategy being, predominantly strong and uneventful for some. It kind of takes away from the thematics of brewing beer and fulfilling orders in this game, and so some people had some issues with that. But my first impressions of this game were very positive. I really enjoyed the mechanisms and how they all synergize together in this game. I like the fact that, and I'm going to make a lot of comparisons actually to Agricola, because while both games feature worker placement and tableau building, and this game also obviously shares a lot with Viticulture as well. I think I would rather play this game over Viticulture, although I probably would rate them about the same because, anyway, I might be getting ahead of myself. Comparing it to Agricola, the worker placement feels very tight and very competitive, as it is in both games. The tableau development feels very similar as well, trying to build out the best part and focus in on a couple of beers or trying to expand your spaces to include as many barrels as possible. As you can see, these extensions that you have also play a big role in how your game might go. Some of them reveal the extra beer spots that you're trying to go for. Some of them allow you to turn beer faster, whereas others allow you to be able to take more bonus actions, etc. And so there are a lot of different ways your game can end up, which is very intriguing. Ultimately you're trying to accomplish the same thing, but the journey might feel a little bit different each time, which is very reminiscent of how each game of Agricola feels. I will say that the card play is a lot more varied in Agricola, which makes the game feel more variable and replayable compared to this one. But in my opinion, I felt like this game was more deterministic than Viticulture is. I think in Viticulture, despite the fact that you can utilize a vast amount of ways to be able to gain points, whether it's strictly through order fulfillment or through wine tasting and touring, or through different combinations of cards. You do have a lot of viable strategies there, but I do feel like the card play is a little bit more variable in Viticulture, and if you rely too heavily on the cards to be able to get points, the luck may get you down and not provide the methods that you need to be able to score well in that game, because ultimately it's the cards that determine what kind of orders you have available to fulfill, as well as other ways to score points. And in this game it is very similar as well, but the card pool is, I think, smaller than it is in comparison to Viticulture. And there isn't a lot of variation among the different cards, in a sense that there are different ways to be able to gain some extra money or points based off of these orders. But I feel like I don't know. I felt like it was easier to kind of strategize around these cards than it was compared to Viticulture. So I really enjoyed how tight this game was. Another thing that people had a hard time with was how long this game could take, since it does not have a determined set of rounds that you have from the beginning to the end of the game. But it's very similar to Viticulture, where it starts to ramp up really quick. It does have a slower start, very similar to Agricola, where you have to take care of all of this these chores of cleaning up and refining your tableau to make it ready to start your engine, essentially. It took me 3 or 4 rounds to be able to set all of these beers up, and finally to get them going, and a few extra rounds to be able to get them to a point where I could sell them. In this particular game, I was able to sell twice to 2 different orders, and in addition to other ways to getting points throughout the game. That's what got me to 22 here. But it didn't take me too long for a 1-player or 2-player game. It probably took about an hour to an hour and a half to play. And I think if you're very familiar with worker placement games and have played Viticulture and Agricola and some of the other games that I have mentioned before, then this game, I think, will come a little bit more naturally to you. It's a tight worker placement game with interesting tableau building, thematic approaches to cards, as well as to brewing beer. And if you're a fan of that, then I think this game might be right for you. Now, once again, the language barrier for the physical game, as of right now, is limited to German. I think there are files online where you can get an English rulebook as well as the cards in English as well. But there might be plans for it to be coming out in a physical version with in English or in different languages potentially in the future. There's nothing set in stone as far as I'm aware at the time of this recording. But you could always try it out here on Tabletop Simulator and see if this game is right for you. But those are my thoughts and feelings, first impressions of Bier Pioneers. Thanks for sticking around with this new format that I'm trying out. Let me know what you think. and because I wanted to show you the game, instead of just having PowerPoint slides, depicting parts of the game. But thank you for consulting with me today, and hope that you schedule an appointment with your board gaming doctor real soon. Take care.